at the Westchester Buddhist Center. Derek Meany and I are teaching a course on the Tibetan Buddhist teachings about death. So it all kind of fits. And in preparation for this talk, actually in preparation for the course at WBC as well, I was reading Sachin Pamuk Rinpoche's book on the Bardas called Mind Beyond Death. And I kind of took as the theme for this talk something he said on page 165, which was also really a theme of the retreat that I just did. I was just on a 10-day retreat in Oregon, at Tashi Chuan. And the theme is the essence of liberation, of what it means to achieve liberation. Especially today, a lot of people come to meditation because they feel that they want to calm themselves, practice stress reduction, be more effective executives. It's being taught at the corporate level, mindfulness practice. And mindfulness is really the essence of meditation from a Buddhist perspective. But it's being taught as a way of improving your career. But really, what this path is about achieving fundamental, clear to the bone freedom and liberation. Hopefully in this lifetime. And if not in this lifetime, then in successive ones. And Pamuk Rinpoche defines it very well on page 165. I just happen to remember the page. You can read it yourself. Really what it's about is this, that we all are somewhat trapped in our confused minds. And these minds that we have are spinning continual stories about ourselves and about our world. These stories are always about me and my projects, me and my prospects for disaster, me and my prospects for success and self-improvement. And so they always are about me and the world around me, I and other. And these stories develop over time. In fact, we've inherited them from many lives. And they're somewhat repetitive. In fact, they're very repetitive. They vary slightly each time we tell them because they're influenced by the circumstances around us that we're going through. But there are distinct patterns to each one of our versions of these stories, each one of our styles. And this is what's called the realms in Buddhist psychology or cosmogony. But they come up in very fragmented ways. And really, they come from a part of our mind which in Buddhist terminology is called the storehouse consciousness, or the Alaya Vijnana Kunji. It's one of the 8 consciousnesses. It's probably the most fundamental. It always struck me from my studies in psychology that it was really that Freud happened on it when he actually, it was more of his daughter, Anna, who elaborated the theory of the unconscious and of defense mechanisms, which are really sort of a modern Freudian version of karma. These karmic patternings, the way in which we have developed habitual ways of responding to situations in the world that we regard as unhappy or threatening or promising or whatever they may be. And so we go and walk through our lives, continually seeing the world through these stories. I mean, if we just watch our minds as we walk down the street, as we get up in the morning, as we head towards the bathroom to brush our teeth, or pee, or whatever we're going to do, and the stories are unfolding and spinning in our minds about the day, about our lives. So the purpose of the path is to become free of that. So on the one hand, the purpose of the path, you might say from the negative point of view, is all about cutting through. As Jim Rinpoche talked about, I mean, he took the phrase from the Dzogchen practice of Trikchit, one of the two main practices in the Dzogchen teachings that means cutting through. And what we're cutting through is precisely what I've just described. The workings of karma, the working these stories that spin out in our minds in fragments, more or less. Sometimes they're more fully developed, sometimes they're just little pieces. You see somebody walking towards you, you see this person and you have a reaction, you feel an emotion towards them even though you may not even know them, or perhaps you do. But you're accustomed to reacting to that bold male figure in a particular way, because they remind you of your father or your uncle or whatever it might be. So on the one hand, the purpose of the path is to free us from these stories, to cut through them. But to cut through to what? And that's the other side of it. Again, in the Dzogchen teachings, it's described sometimes threefold, often, in terms of the three bodies of the Buddha, you might say, or the three fundamental natures, which are almost the same thing. Sometimes it's described twofold, what we're cutting through to. On the one hand, it's the Dharmakaya, you might say, which is described as being original purity, kadak, alpha pure. And what's meant by that is that everything arises beyond any description, beyond any judgment or valuation. And not only does it arise beyond any kind of conceptual label, but it arises beyond the strictures of the ideas of existence or non-existence. We walk through a world in which we think that things exist. This is sort of the antithesis of emptiness. It's sort of, if you could have a reverse of emptiness, we see everything, including ourselves, as having true existence. The term in Sanskrit is svabhava, sometimes translated as own being or inherent existence. And it has three qualities. That what we see, ourselves and others, are single, unitary. That they are independent, that everything arises independently. And that things are ongoing, that they have an ongoing being, that even though you're not looking at that chair, it's still there, and when you turn back, there it is again. And that it's been ongoing. But you see, all of this is just an idea, just a concept. Because what we experience in the present moment is not ongoing. It's continually, utterly fluxing. As we turn our heads, and I no longer see the chair, and then I move my head back, and there's the chair. As these sounds arise and pass away, as your attention shifts from the pain in your knee to the thought in your head, it's like we're sitting in the middle of a constantly shifting movie. And yet, we believe, and the operative word here is believe, that things have an ongoing existence. There's no evidence of that. It's just our idea. Because what we experience, in fact, continually, always, in the present moment, is a continual change. Suzuki Roshi was once asked, Alan Chadwick recounts it in the beginning of his biography of Roshi, was once asked to sum up the essence of Buddhism in a couple of words. And he responded, everything changes. And it is. It's changing all the time in the present moment. This world that we think is so solid, full of ongoing peoples and rocks and trees and stars and me, is likened in the Buddhist teachings to a reflection in a mirror. It's like you look in the mirror, you can't grasp it, and it's continually changing, like it's slipping through your fingers like quicksilver. So the idea that everything is alpha pure refers to that utter purity of the phenomenal world as it arises, without substance, in this present moment, and only in this present moment, continually arising and passing away. And the second quality of the real, you might say, is that it's spontaneous and it is luminous. That things arise full of color, unbidden, full of sound, full of what are called the six knowables: sound, taste, smell, touch, sight, sound, smell, taste, touch. What have I left out? And thought. All of these things arise unbidden, unstoppably, spontaneously. The term in Tibetan is klundrup. And they arise luminously, like the whole world is glowing with information. That's what phenomena are. A constant presentation of meaningfulness and of information. And so this path is one of cutting through these nasty, habitual stories that are so painful and that enslave us, to this world, this luminous world, this alpha pure of substanceless, constant, luminous presentation. It's worthwhile, I think, to consider how nasty the world of concept and of habit of karma is. In this world, it's all about me and my well-being, me and my happiness, unhappiness. And we're sort of, it's like the perils of Pauline. Remember the perils of Pauline? There was a 19th century melodrama, and Pauline is tied to the railroad tracks, and the train is coming, and will the hero manage to save her before the train comes and runs her over? And we're continually living the perils of Pauline. These are our dramas. We constantly construct these dramas for us. Will I get the job? Will I keep the job? Will I win the girl? Will I win the guy? Will I keep the person? Will I be happy? Will I be unhappy? And it goes on like this. And these dramas, these constructs, are full of goals. This is this dramatic structure of a story, that we have an arc, that we're heading towards a goal. If we get the goal very easily, well, then there's no story. It's over. It's just gone. You forget about it. It was boring. A bad story, a boring story. It just passes away. You can barely remember it even happened. But if the obstacle that arises is profound, then you've got a real drama. Then you've got something you can't turn the TV off for, because you really want to stick around and see what happens and whether there's going to be an up ending or a down ending. I really think that the stories that we watch on television and the movies that we read in novels that grip us so are distillations of the fragmented stories that we tell ourselves, full of this drama, this storm and thunder, storm und Drang, they said in German. We see these little fragments. We walk down the street. Somebody comes towards you. You don't even know them. You have an emotional reaction towards that person. They remind you of something. Something you don't like, something you do like. something you're attracted to, something you're repelled by, something you're frightened by, and you go through an emotional story. You can even tell yourself the whole story, and in the time it takes to pass that person you don't know on the street. I do this all the time. You can sit in the subway and do it with the people sitting across from you. You can do all kinds of constructs. So the task that we have really is continually to cut through this karmic chain of ongoing momentum, the momentum of these stories that are full of good and bad, hope and fear. They're lit by these things. I took a film seminar with Robert McKee once. It's called Story. And in it, he's just all about story. He doesn't really care whether it's film or novels or short stories or theatrical plays. It's all the same thing. They're all lit by stories. And the question is, can you tell a good story? And in order for it to be a good story, there has to be a value change from each scene to the next. By value change, I mean from good to bad, from bad to good, from good to better, from bad to worse. If there's no value change like that, people won't be interested. They'll just be bored. They'll walk out. Nothing's happening. This is samsara. This is our world. I remember when Trungpa Rinpoche started making movies. We had what was called the Milarepa Film Project. And he started shooting footage, and we were all amazed at how boring it was. It was so boring, and flat. And he just laughed. No, there was no drama. No idea of will Milarepa meet the guru. I remember him telling me one time, he said, telling a bunch of us, he was saying, Milarepa, he was so stupid. He was really, really stupid. And that was his virtue. And then he looked at me and he said, you're not that stupid. Too bad. So really, what we practice, our practice, is about cutting through these dramas again and again, coming back to something as boring, as simple, as in the present, as the breath. The breath is sort of like a handle that we use to pull ourselves back to the present. All the practices we do are aimed at, on the one hand, cutting through these habitual karmic stories, and on the other hand, coming back to an appreciation of the beauty and vividness of this world as it arises in the present moment. That's really what Tantra is about. The Mahayana is all about discovering freedom from the stories, about cutting through karma, cutting through belief in I and other, in this ongoing entity. Freedom from karma. And they say the Bodhisattva, when the Bodhisattva discovers this freedom, which is the first bhumi, pramudita, it's called in Sanskrit, means great joy. Great joy, why? Because there's suddenly freedom from me. Freedom from me. This huge sack of woe that we carry around on our backs, some of us. And so the Bodhisattva is overjoyed. But then there's this progression through the 10 bhumis, which is the falling away of the appreciation of that freedom. Because even the appreciation of that freedom is fishy. Who's appreciating it? Who got free? Why this big deal about having cut through? And that has to wear away. And the entrance into Tantra is really the discovery of the luminosity. And that's where the word ursel, or prabhasvara in Sanskrit, ursel in Tibetan, starts to become very, very large, as in the Tantras in Sanskrit. And there's constant talk of the union of luminosity and emptiness, of prabhasvara and shunyata. Because when we talk about something being empty, well, there's this something that's empty. And the Bodhisattva is concentrating on the emptiness. But the enlightened person, the Tantrika, the Vidyadhara, the crazy wisdom person, is celebrating the beauty of the phenomenal world as it arises in the present moment. And it starts right with the very first of the yanas, which is Kriya Yana, which is the Bodhisattva is so overwhelmed by the brilliance, or the new Tantrika is so overwhelmed by the brilliance of the world that they just want to worship its purity, its alpha pure quality. So, I guess this is on my mind partly because we're studying all this up in Westchester. And it's very appropriate that we deal with someone's death today. They say that there are 5 opportunities during the course of one's life and death, one's experience, 5 times, 5 ways that one can experience profound wakefulness. One way is in meditation. That's one. Let's see if I can remember all 5. Second way is a sneeze. Sneeze can wake you up. It just jolts you. Third is a moment of orgasm. Can be a wake-up. Fourth is a shock. You're walking down the street, lost in thought, a cabbie blasts his horn right behind you, and you're just jolted into wakefulness. And I think I've got too many in here. Only 5. Meditation. It can happen in meditation practice. While you're practicing. So I think I've got 6.
No, you mentioned it.
Huh?
You mentioned...
Oh, I did? I already mentioned meditation? Good. Okay. So meditation. And the 5th is the moment of death. That the moment of death is such a jolt, it's a shock, that it cuts through one's habitual patterns. And there are opportunities at that point to wake up and fundamentally see these 2 aspects of reality, the alpha pure and the luminosity. The luminosity encompasses both the Sambhogakaya and the Nirmanakaya, for those of you who studied the Kayas. It's the embodiment aspect of the phenomenal, it's the phenomenal world aspect. And they say that precisely at the moment of death, there's a chance to achieve perfectly pure enlightenment, that one can clear through to the primordial ground, this complete ground of awareness beyond any karmic patterning. And if one can do that and abide in that, the journey's over. And then if one can't, then there's another opportunity if you've trained for it. If you've trained for it. And the key here is training, what we're doing now in the meditation that we're all doing. And the second opportunity is that you begin to see the vividness, you might say, of the spontaneous luminosity. And it arises in the form of the peaceful and wrathful deities. These 42 peaceful and 58 wrathful deities. This is called the bardo of reality, the space or the interval of reality. And in this one can actually begin to see these. They're there all the time. They're there right now. In fact, they're here right now. But we're so wrapped up in our stories about who we are and who the people are that are sitting in front of us or around us that we just can't see them. So, I think we have this very precious opportunity. And I'm amazed at the extent to which it's so possible to get caught up in the mundanities of this world and miss this opportunity. You go on retreat, and one can get inspired, And we're going to say, yes, I'm going to seize the opportunity. Then you come back and you start worrying about paying the rent and what your significant other is up to, and your relationships and your loneliness and your health and your money and and practice and cutting through, and all of this go right out the window. And we could wind up sleepwalking through our lives right into the next realm, which is what happens when we don't wake up. So I feel like this is a bit of a fire and brimstone, this talk. But it's probably coming out of the retreat that I just did and the teachings that I was listening to on this retreat, because it was pretty fierce. So we could have a discussion if you like, complaints or questions, comments. Stefan.
I feel a little uncomfortable with the notion that our experience, or actual experiences, that things are always changing. Of course, that's what we're told. And not only told that Buddhist teachings, scientifically, it's a fact, things are always changing. There isn't anything perfect, static, zero. But when you talk about our experience, certainly our experience is not that it's always changing. It's both. I mean, our experiences, actual experiences, that things are always changing and that nothing is changing. Probably more often than not, our experiences of things not changing. Self not changing, we don't think we're getting older as much as we actually are. We meet people, and they seem to be the same. We come home, same favorite chair, same favorite restaurant, that kind of thing. And when we talk about what we cut through to, as we were talking about, like we cut through to what? The implication is that there is some, in this kind of absolute alpha pure, whatever, something that's unchanging. And yet, that's, experientially always seems to be changing too, in that our epiphanies and what we cut through to seem to not be coming back to that same epiphany we had when we were 12 or 15 or 25 or 35. But it seems to be something. What?
Mike.
Oh, yeah, changing.
Yeah.
So it's a kind of a funny thing. I guess I just wanted to start off saying that we seem to be led to a certain kind of cliche version of things always changing. But when you examine your actual experience, it's not like that. It doesn't. I'm talking personally. I just feel it's like there's something that is both. The changing and unchanging. That's the way I find things. And even that thing that you cut through to, that unchanging, is changing. That make any sense to you?
Maybe. The teachings do say there is something that's unchanging. Space.
Right.
And the union of space and knowledge. That this space is lit by knowingness, by wisdom. And also, the present moment is always now. I remember when Rinpoche, I heard him first speak about death, and a woman in the audience, he talked about rebirth. And what he said was that we're living in the midst of rebirth right now. Everything is constantly dying and being reborn, instant by instant. And that physical death, the death of this body, is just a grosser example of what's happening in the moment. It's a very gross example. And there's constant loss and constant arising anew. And then this woman in the Q&A raised her hand and obviously sort of half hearing what he'd said and wanting reassurance. He was saying there's no such thing as reincarnation. He distinguished between reincarnation, which is the idea that there's some eternal essence like me that's going to survive and take a new body,
Uh-huh.
And he said there's no such thing. That it's just continual change, like dominoes going over, like water flowing. You can't find what's changed, and yet there's a continuity within the change. Because like the dominoes going over, there's a continuousness. So this woman raises her hand and she says, kind of half having heard him, she said, how do you know there's such a thing as rebirth? You could hear what she wanted to know. She wanted reassurance that it wasn't going to be the final end, that she would continue on in some way. And he really didn't address her true question, but he did address the question. He said that there's such a thing as rebirth because it's always now. It's always now. It's just everything is dying and being reborn now. Now. So if there's a constant, it's now. And what the now consists of is the union, as they say in the Tantras, of space and wisdom, of yin and yeshe in the Tibetan. Yin is the space that we're inhabiting. Yeshe encompasses everything, the phenomenal world as it arises and passes. And yet you really can't point to anything. Try and point to space. Try and point to knowledge, knowingness. But it's around. The word Tantra itself means continuity. That's what it means. It's the continuity of space and wisdom. That's the teaching. Remember how much Rinpoche talked about space? I always wondered about it. I couldn't understand why he did it so much. It's beginning to come home after all these years. Michelle wants to say something.
I think that Rinpoche talked about space, and most Tibetan teachers talk about space, is because first there's space, then the mandala arises in that space, and then it dissolves in that space. So the mandalas are constantly arising and dissolving, arising and dissolving. And we can just be in that place of the arising and dissolving, and that's what we're talking about.
Well said. Yeah.
Or Rinpoche would say, now, if you're in the now, then you're in the now.
I remember him saying too, he was looking out at us and he was, so you're all walking zombies because we're lost up in our thoughts. And then he started talking about how painful death was going to be for us. And he said, you think it's painful to lose your wallet? You think it's painful, to lose your youth? And you think it's painful to lose a loved one? He said, when you die, you lose the whole world. It's really going to be painful. Yeah, he was really... I was up at Rocky Mountain Dharma Center one summer. And then I'm reminded of my friend Don telling me and some other people, he was with the Karmapa, the 16th Karmapa, when he died in Chicago in a hospital. And he was sitting on a cushion by the Karmapa's bed. And the Karmapa was asleep, and he was crying. He was sitting on the cushion crying. And suddenly he felt a hand on his head. And he looked up, and it was the Karmapa who put his hand on his head. And the Karmapa looked down at him from the bed, and he said, "Don't worry, nothing happens." That's one to meditate on. So, if we practiced, we can negotiate death a lot better. The whole idea of the Sakavati chant is that if we practice, we begin to let go of our aggression, and we begin to see the world as it truly is, which is as a beautiful and colorful arising, which is what the Sakavati is all about. Sakavati doesn't necessarily mean you're enlightened, but you can go to, it's a heaven, as it were. But I think Paula Rinpoche and other teachers, they say that it's a state of mind that you can project your consciousness into. If you've trained for it, if you've developed your ability to cut through and begin to see this world in its pristine way, beyond concept. And then you can go to this space where you might not have achieved enlightenment, but where it's a lot easier to achieve enlightenment. That's what a Sakavati is a mental space. Maybe that what we're sitting in the middle of right now is a mental space. And it may be for some of the people who are here, it's a Sakavati. I don't claim that myself. So we hope that for Olive and for others. Yes.
Talking about Olive, months and months ago, one night I was making a tea offering. My window in the living room, my shrine is, faces the courtyard. There's another building on the other side. And I just looked at the building, it was at night, and the shades were open, and an apartment like a floor down, and there were these two people making love naked. The window was open, the shades were open, and I just kind of looked at them, and I thought, this is what it must be like in the Bardo. When you're kind of like meandering around, all confused, and then you grasp onto something. You grasp onto these two people. Whatever they are.
I see, the moment of taking rebirth.
Yeah, and then you want to jump into that scene. And I was thinking, I've got to stay away from that scene. That's not that. It just connected to the Bardo.
Right.
So the next day, I spoke to Olive on the phone, who's been living in Tucson all these years, and I told her about it. And she started laughing. And I said, this is what it must be like in the bardo. And I just had this feeling that, I knew that she was sick then. And she kept saying, I'm going to be dying soon. But it just sort of like a coincidence that this is what I saw, and I talked to her about it. And she took it very seriously. So it was kind of shocking. It was
well, they say that you see your parents copulating.
Yeah.
This is there are three main bardo, the death bardos. Actually, just two. But there's one that's the painful bardo of dying describes the process of the dissolution of the body. And at the moment that the body and the mind completely dissolve, that's the moment of death. And that's the end of the bardo of this life, the painful bardo of dying. And then you go into the death bardos, and the first one is the bardo of reality, which is where you see the peaceful and wrathful deities, you see the mandalas arranged in all their colors, and you also begin to see, towards the end of that, if you don't achieve enlightenment in that bardo, you begin to see the realms.
Well, what is seeing that if your mind's gone?
You have a mental body, just as you do when you're dreaming. When you're
how
dreaming,
do you have a mental body without a mind?
When the mind is coming back, aspects of the mind. The karmic stream is still, it goes away completely for a split second, and then if you don't achieve enlightenment, this is the story, then it starts to come back and build.
From nothing.
Huh?
It's completely gone, and then from nothing it completely arises.
It's doing that all the time anyhow, Stefan.
But then
where's
the karma?
The karma is in the ongoingness of the stories that we tell, the impetus, the feeling of I, the feeling of me and mine.
In the moment when it's completely dissolved, in that instant.
Yeah, but that happens to us too all the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then from where does the karma continue past that gap when there is nothing?
Good question. But it's happening right now. We are having continual gaps, and yet the karma, the story, revives and continues. And we don't even notice the gaps most of the time, unless, something happens, one of those 5 events.
So they say.
So they say. And you can also experience it in relationship to a teacher. And that can be called pointing out instruction. When a teacher shows you, as they say in the language, shows you the nature of your mind. And what the teacher is showing you is that gap. So,
what is the gap?
It's the gap in the stories that we tell ourselves. When we tell ourselves a story, you say, I am, I want, I think, I feel. All of those statements have a beginning and an end. Now we focus on the statement. It's like a figure ground problem. The figure takes place against a ground, but normally, when you see a figure ground drawing, you don't even notice the ground. You just look at the figure. Trungpa Rinpoche once gave a lecture on this, and he went up to the blackboard, and he drew a stick drawing of a bird. This is to a bunch of Sleepy's University of Colorado students. And he was teaching the 3 bodies of the Buddha. And he drew a stick drawing of a bird on the blackboard. And he asked, what's that a picture of? It's one of those stupid questions, nobody wants to answer. And finally somebody said, it's a picture of a bird. And he said, it's a picture of the sky. Now, we're constantly focused on the thoughts, on the stories, because they're full of storm and thunder, drama. And we don't notice the space behind them because it's so boring. But that space is constantly there, but we just focus on sort of leaping from one rock to the next, one story, one drama to the next. But that particular gap is very pronounced in the death process. It's happening now, but it's supposedly because of the extremity of the circumstance, your body is gone. You've lost it all. And in that extremity, there's a tremendous opportunity to see the gap. And if you've practiced, and if you've experienced that openness, that cutting through to original purity during your life, then they say that the opportunity to recognize the real, thing, when you are in the middle of this dying process, is very great. You have a much greater opportunity. And what it is they talk about it as being the mother and child luminosity, or the mother and child awareness. The mother, you see, is the real. It's the ground. It's that open space of awareness. It's truly real. The child is your practice. The fact that you've seen it, you can remember it. Maybe you're not having it right now, but you have a faint memory of something, a gap. That moment when you were walking down the stairs and suddenly there was this moment of the sun coming through the window and it shocked you and you said, what was that? And you saw everything as being brilliant. Who knows what it was? Every one of us has moments of gap. The more you've practiced, the more when that moment occurs in the process of dying, you will recognize it. And if the recognition occurs, they say it's like a child recognizing its mother. You don't have to, every child recognizes its mother, instinctively. And they say that the child then is like a child leaping into its mother's lap. That the practitioner, recognizing that moment of reality, becomes one with it and achieves enlightenment. Now, if that doesn't occur, there's still many opportunities, just as there are in this life. They just become harder and harder to grasp, just as they are in this life. But that last one that Rochelle was talking about, that's really interesting. If you keep missing them and missing them and missing them, you keep getting more and more embodied. The habits keep re-arising and becoming stronger, and it's like your memory, they keep reasserting themselves, coming out of the storehouse consciousness. And finally, you become, they say that at first you have the body of a 7-year-old child from your past life, and then you have the body of a small child that you're going to have in your next life. This is all like a dream. We have bodies and dreams, and it's all mental, and that's what this is. But at some point you see your parents copulating, and this is the main impetus to rebirth is the sex drive. That is it. That is the most powerful impetus to rebirth. And they say that you will be, if you're going to be reborn male, you're attracted to the woman. And in the act of copulation. And if you're going to be reborn a woman, you're attracted to the man. And you enter the woman's womb, and here it goes. Beautiful teachings. And Pala Rinpoche's book is amazing. It's really, really clear. It's one of the very best. We have a short list. We like that book. We like Francesca. It's called Mind Beyond Death. It's terrific. And Francesca's book is excellent. Luminous Emptiness. Really wonderful. And I actually like Sogyo Rinpoche's book. It's really brilliant. I just have some difficulties with it as well, but in terms of doctrine and readability, it's amazing. Patrick Gaffney, who edited it, did an extraordinary job. He's a brilliant, brilliant editor. And it's probably the most popular Dharma book that I know of. The Tibetan Book of Living and Dying. Those three. And then there are others. If you want to read an original text, I don't recommend the Book of the Dead. It's a hard way into these teachings. But there is a book by, help me, somebody, Selling Nuts Up Mongo. His book, thank you. Mirror of Mindfulness. Beautiful book. And that's Dharma. That's revealed text. So that's original. If you want to read something original. It's a beautiful book. The Book of the Dead is really a manual. for survivors to help the person who's dying by reminding them to wake up. And it's describing what's going on. So because you see the biggest problem we've got in death is fear. And so you're constantly encouraging them not to be afraid, to have confidence, to be of good cheer, and telling them what's going to happen and that they are dead. And it's really a manual for the survivors to help the dead person through the bardas.
If their minds and bodies are dissolved, how are they hearing you?
Because they do hear you. Supposedly, this is what the teachings say, is that this is why you don't touch the body for 3.5 days. The consciousness, depending on the individual, can hang around the body. And I noticed with my mother, I mean, maybe it's my imagination, but I felt that for 3.5 days I'd walk in and the room was sort of warm, you know? And then on the third, 3.5, 4 days, suddenly everything in the room went cold. It was as though something had left. I'm not very psychic, so that's my feeling. But that's what the teaching is. And they also tell you to tell the person they're dead. And we did that. We whispered in my mother's ear and my father's ear when they both died, "You're dead." It's okay. Because it can be very confusing. And what True Rinpoche said is that ghosts, when places are haunted, are people who don't know that they've died. And they're hanging around and they're very unhappy and frustrated trying to make contact with the living. They don't understand what's going on. And he actually exorcised ghosts by going into a place where it was supposed to be haunted and telling people, "You're dead. Move on. Get on with your journey." Yes, Michelle.
At our seminary,
You're amazing.
there was supposedly a ghost at our seminary.
Which seminary is that?
1982, Bedford Springs
Oh,
Hotel.
all right.
And long, very interesting story. But the way that Trungpa Rinpoche asked us to assist this mind that was confused, that had evidently passed away in the 1920s. And so he had us do the Heart Sutra, chant the Heart Sutra many times a day for many, many days. And then at a certain point he said, "It's over."
Wow.
And traditionally the Heart Sutra is used as a kind of a mantra at times of transition, such as dying.
Yeah. Well, we should end. So we could dedicate the merit, and then we have some refreshments. And people need the chant, dedicate the merit. I see all these old dogs here.
Should I lead it?
I'll just do it from here. By this merit,
may all obtain omniscience, may they defeat the enemy wrongdoing, from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. From the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. May the confidence of the golden sun of the great east, may the lotus garden of the Rigden's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, radiant glory.